Sarah and Tom Anderson had lived in their suburban home for nearly a decade, nestled in the peaceful Oak Ridge Estates community. Their two-story colonial with its neatly trimmed hedges and flower beds full of perennials had become everything they dreamed of when they first moved in as newlyweds. With 3 kids minus 14-year-old twins Emily and Ethan, and 12-year-old Zach, they had finally saved enough to install an in-ground pool last summer after years of careful budgeting and overtime shifts at Tom's engineering firm. The kidney-shaped pool with its elegant blue tile border and small waterfall feature had transformed their ordinary backyard into a private resort. Sarah, a part-time photographer who worked from home, often found herself setting up her laptop on the patio table under the large umbrella, sipping iced tea while the automated pool cleaner hummed quietly beneath the surface. The backyard oasis quickly became the center of family life, especially during the sweltering summer months when temperatures regularly climbed into the high 90s. Their neighborhood had always been quiet and friendly, with tree-lined streets where children rode bikes until dusk and neighbors waved as they collected their mail or walked their dogs. The annual Memorial Day block party was a tradition everyone looked forward to, with potluck dishes covering folding tables and friendly competitions of horseshoes and cornhole stretching into the evening hours. Weekend afternoons typically featured impromptu gatherings where kids moved from one yard to another, parents chatting on porches or helping with DIY projects. The Andersons had installed a 6-foot cedar privacy fence around their yard, standard for the area and required by the Homeowners Association for pools, with a double gate that allowed access for maintenance equipment. Their property backed up to 3 other homes, creating a patchwork of private spaces where families could enjoy outdoor living without intruding on one another's privacy. For years, they'd maintained cordial relationships with all the surrounding neighbors, exchanging holiday cards and occasionally borrowing tools or ingredients for last-minute recipes. Emily had grown into a confident teenager who excelled at competitive swimming and often practiced her strokes in the pool, while Ethan, her more introverted twin, preferred to float on a raft with a science fiction novel in hand. Young Zach, the family's natural comedian, had perfected a series of increasingly elaborate cannonballs that he rated on a self-designed splash-o-meter. Sarah and Tom often joked that installing the pool had been cheaper than therapy for keeping 3 active kids harmoniously occupied during summer breaks. They'd never had any issues with neighbors before. In fact, the family was generally well regarded in the community. Tom served on the HOA landscaping committee, Sarah volunteered at the elementary school library, and the kids participated in various community service projects through their schools. The Anderson home had become known for its Halloween decorations and Christmas lights, drawing admiring visitors from around the neighborhood during holiday seasons. Life in Oak Ridge Estates had settled into a pleasant rhythm for the Andersons, with the pool representing the culmination of years of planning and saving, a symbol of their success as a family. Little did they know that their backyard sanctuary was about to become the center of a neighborhood controversy that would test community bonds and eventually reveal hidden stories behind seemingly simple suburban conflicts. Everything changed on a crisp March morning when moving trucks rumbled down the quiet street and stopped at 437 Elmwood Lane, the Tudor-style house that directly backed up to the Andersons' property. After sitting vacant for nearly 4 months following the Johnsons' relocation to Florida, the house had finally sold. The neighborhood grapevine hummed with speculation about who might be joining their community. Martha Wilkinson arrived with military precision, directing the movers with clipboard in hand and sharp commands that carried over the fence into Sarah's garden, where she had been pruning early spring roses. A tall, thin woman with steel-gray hair pulled into a tight bun and wire-rimmed glasses perched on a narrow nose, Martha moved with the authoritative stride of someone accustomed to being obeyed. The Andersons learned from their next-door neighbor Diane that Martha was a retired school district administrator in her mid-60s who had relocated from a neighboring county. The first encounter seemed pleasant enough. Tom spotted Martha inspecting her new mailbox and walked over to introduce himself, offering help with any heavy lifting or neighborhood orientation. Martha's smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she declined, informing him she had managed educational institutions with hundreds of students and staff, and was perfectly capable of settling in without assistance. Nevertheless, Tom left his phone number just in case and returned home, shrugging off the coolness of the interaction. Within 2 weeks, however, a pattern emerged that left the Andersons increasingly bewildered. It began with a formal letter, not a personal note, but a typed document on letterhead, requesting that they trim a maple tree branch that extended slightly over the property line. Tom complied immediately, even though the branch wasn't causing any issues. 3 days later, the HOA president called Tom, somewhat embarrassed, to inform him that a new resident had filed a complaint about their garbage cans being visible from the street for approximately 3.5 hours after collection, well within the 24-hour grace period allowed by community guidelines. When the twins had friends over for a study session that stretched into an early dinner on the patio, Martha appeared at the fence, standing on what must have been a stepladder, to inform them that young people's voices carry, and that she was trying to enjoy a quiet retirement. The following week, she called animal control, claiming that the Andersons' elderly golden retriever, Max, who could barely navigate the 3 steps to the back door due to arthritis, had somehow scaled their fence, dug up her newly planted begonias, and returned without leaving any gap in the fence. Sarah, ever the peacemaker, decided to follow her mother's old advice: kill them with kindness. She spent an afternoon baking her award-winning chocolate chunk cookies and walked around the block to Martha's front door with the carefully arranged gift basket. The door opened just wide enough for Martha to peer through the gap, chain lock still engaged. Her eyes narrowed at the offering, and with visible reluctance, she accepted the basket with a curt "thank you, but I don't consume refined sugar." Before Sarah could respond, the door closed with a definitive click, leaving her standing on the porch with her rehearsed welcome speech undelivered. By the time May rolled around and pool season approached, the Andersons had received 2 more HOA notices inspired by Martha's complaints, and had taken to warning the children to keep their voices down when playing in the backyard. Tom had begun referring to their property as the demilitarized zone, while Sarah remained determined to find some way to establish peaceful relations with their seemingly unpleasable new neighbor. The first Saturday in July arrived with temperatures soaring to 97 degrees by noon, the kind of oppressive heat that turned asphalt sticky and sent most residents scurrying into air-conditioned sanctuaries. For the Andersons, it was the perfect day to host the annual family gathering they'd been planning for weeks. Sarah's sister Jen was driving in from Cincinnati with her kids minus 13-year-old Mia and 15-year-old Lucas for their summer visit, a tradition that predated even the pool installation. By 1 o'clock, the backyard hummed with activity. Tom stood at the grill in his dad, the man, the myth, the grill master apron, carefully arranging chicken and vegetable skewers while consulting the meat thermometer with scientific precision. Sarah bustled between the kitchen and patio, arranging colorful platters of fresh fruit, pasta salad, and her famous jalapeno cornbread. The built-in Bluetooth speakers played a carefully curated summer playlist at a moderate volume, loud enough to create atmosphere but not enough to disturb neighbors. In the pool, the 5 cousins had created an elaborate game that seemed to be part Marco Polo, part synchronized swimming competition, and part cannonball contest. Zach had appointed himself splash judge, holding up numerical ratings written on laminated cards after each jump. The twins and their cousins took turns performing increasingly theatrical dives, complete with mid-air poses and exaggerated facial expressions that sent them all into fits of laughter. Emily wore her competition one-piece swimsuit with her school logo, while Mia had on a modest teal tankini. The boys were in standard swim trunks, nothing that would raise eyebrows at any public pool or beach. "Mom, watch this one," Ethan called out as he prepared for a backward jump he'd been practicing. Sarah paused from arranging watermelon slices to give him her attention, smiling at the rare moment of extroversion from her usually reserved son. The wail of sirens in the distance barely registered at first, not uncommon in a suburb of their size. But when the sound grew louder instead of fading, Sarah and Tom exchanged puzzled glances. The sirens stopped abruptly, replaced by the distinctive slam of car doors just outside their house. "Are we expecting anyone else?" Tom asked, spatula frozen mid-flip. Sarah shook her head, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel as she moved toward the front gate. Through the decorative ironwork, she could see 2 Oak Ridge Police Department cruisers parked at angles in front of their driveway, lights still flashing. 2 officers, one male and one female, approached with purposeful strides, hands resting near their equipment belts. "Mrs. Anderson?" the female officer asked, her expression professionally neutral. "Yes, that's me," Sarah replied, confusion evident in her voice as she unlatched the gate. "Is everything okay?" The male officer, whose nameplate read Officer Daniels, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we received a 911 call approximately 15 minutes ago, reporting minors engaged in public indecency and disturbing the peace at this address. The caller was quite insistent that we respond immediately." Sarah's jaw dropped. Behind her, Tom had approached, overhearing the conversation. The children, sensing something amiss, had gone quiet in the pool, water dripping from their puzzled faces as they clustered at the shallow end. "Public indecency," Sarah managed to stammer. "They're swimming in our backyard, in regular swimsuits." Officer Daniels shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, ma'am, we understand that. Unfortunately, we're required to investigate all 911 calls. The caller specifically mentioned near-naked children screaming obscenities and behavior inappropriate for a residential area." Tom's face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and indignation. "That's absolutely ridiculous. Would you like to see for yourselves? We're having a family barbecue. The kids are playing in the pool. There's nothing indecent happening here." As Officer Daniels and his partner, Officer Rivera, followed the Andersons through the side gate into the backyard, the festive atmosphere had evaporated completely. The music had been turned off, the sizzling grill temporarily abandoned. 5 confused children sat at the edge of the pool, wrapped in beach towels despite the heat, eyes wide with uncertainty. "As you can see," Tom gestured around the yard, "this is a private family gathering. The fence is 6 feet high on all sides, and we're well within noise ordinance limits." His voice remained steady, but Sarah noticed the muscle twitching in his jaw, a telltale sign of his suppressed anger. Officer Rivera nodded, her expression softening as she surveyed the clearly innocent scene. "Your property looks perfectly in order, Mr. Anderson. We'll need to file a report, but I don't see any violations here." A sharp voice suddenly cut through the air. Well, of course they cleaned up their act when they heard sirens. All heads turned toward the back fence where Martha Wilkinson's face appeared above the cedar planks. She stood on what looked like an aluminum stepladder, her hands gripping the top of the fence, knuckles white with tension. A wide-brimmed garden hat shaded her face, but couldn't disguise the triumph in her expression. "Ms. Wilkinson, I presume?" Officer Daniels asked, recognition flickering across his features. "That's right," Martha replied, chin raised, "and I've documented everything." The screaming started at precisely 12:47 p.m. "I have recordings." Sarah stepped forward, disbelief coloring her voice. "Martha, these are children swimming in a private backyard. How could you possibly call 911? They're practically naked." Martha hissed, pointing accusingly at the pool. "And the language. I heard that little one." She jabbed a finger toward Zach, who shrank behind his older siblings. "Yell, holy *P when he jumped in. That's profanity." Tom's patience visibly snapped. "Are you kidding me? You called emergency services because a 12-year-old said holy crap while jumping into a pool. Do you have any idea what actual emergencies the police could be handling right now?" Officer Rivera stepped between them, her posture professional but her tone firm. "Ms. Wilkinson, 911 is reserved for genuine emergencies. Children in swimwear in a private fenced yard is not indecent exposure, and while we encourage respectful language, occasional excited expressions from children do not constitute disturbing the peace." Martha's face flushed crimson. "So you're taking their side?" "I moved to this neighborhood for peace and quiet. Property values are going to plummet with this. This water park atmosphere." She swept her arm toward the modest family pool. "I have a right to tranquility in my own home." "You have reasonable expectations of peace," Officer Daniels corrected gently, "but your neighbors have reasonable rights to enjoy their property as well, including swimming in their pool on a 97-degree day." Sarah, ever the mediator, tried once more. "Martha, we can discuss volume concerns. If there are specific times you need quiet." "I don't negotiate with people who don't respect community standards," Martha interrupted, her voice rising. I've already contacted the HOA about adding a noise ordinance specifically for pools, and I'll be speaking to the zoning board about that monstrosity." She gestured toward the small waterfall feature. Officer Rivera made a few notes in her pad, then addressed both parties. "Since there's clearly no law being broken here, we'll be on our way. Ms. Wilkinson, I'd strongly advise against using emergency services for neighborhood disputes. There are non-emergency numbers and mediation services available." As the officers turned to leave, Martha's voice followed them. "I pay my taxes. I expect services when I call, and I'll be filing a complaint about your handling of this situation." From their huddle by the pool, young Zach whispered to his cousins, "Is that lady going to get us arrested?" The genuine fear in his voice made Sarah's heart constrict as she exchanged a worried glance with Tom. This had moved beyond a simple neighborhood annoyance. It was now affecting their children's sense of security in their own home. News travels at lightning speed in close-knit communities, and by Sunday morning, the story of the pool police incident, as it was already being called, had spread throughout Oak Ridge Estates. Diane Miller, who lived next door to the Andersons, had witnessed the police cars and immediately started a neighborhood text chain. By evening, the community Facebook group buzzed with discussions, most expressing disbelief and support for the Anderson family. "I cannot believe someone would waste police resources like that," wrote Greg Thompson, a retired firefighter from 2 streets over. "My grandson wears the same swim trunks at the community pool that he wears in his backyard. Since when is that indecent?" Monday morning, Jessica Chen, the HOA president and local pediatrician, appeared on Martha's doorstep with HOA bylaws in hand and a determination to address the situation directly. Martha invited her in reluctantly, arms crossed defensively. "Ms. Wilkinson," Jessica began once they were seated in Martha's immaculate living room, "I wanted to personally review our community guidelines with you. Section 7 specifically addresses backyard pool usage, and I can assure you the Andersons are well within compliance." "Those guidelines are clearly insufficient," Martha sniffed, adjusting her reading glasses. "When I was district administrator, we had strict codes of conduct. Children running around half-dressed, screaming at all hours. It's uncivilized." Jessica maintained her professional composure. "Private family swimming during daylight hours in appropriate attire is both civilized and expected in a neighborhood where 37% of homes have pools." She leaned forward slightly. "More concerning is the misuse of emergency services. The police department has contacted me about potential fines if false reports continue." Martha's expression hardened. "I pay my association dues. I expect support, not threats." Meanwhile, the incident had galvanized the neighborhood in unexpected ways. Rachel Orozco, who ran the Community Garden Project, created a private social media event called Splash Out Saturday, a coordinated afternoon where families with pools would use them simultaneously in a show of solidarity. 23 households signed up within hours. "It's not about being confrontational," Rachel explained to Sarah when she dropped by with a supportive casserole. "It's about not letting one person dictate how we all live. My kids should be able to cannonball without fear of SWAT teams arriving." The Andersons appreciated the support but worried about escalation. Their concerns proved valid when Ethan noticed something metallic glinting from Martha's second-floor window on Wednesday afternoon. "Dad," he called quietly, pointing toward the neighboring property. "I think those are cameras." Tom borrowed binoculars from his birdwatching kit and confirmed his son's observation. 2 security cameras had been mounted under the eaves of Martha's house, angled directly toward their backyard and pool area. "This has gone too far," Sarah whispered, watching Zach nervously peeking toward Martha's house before deciding not to swim that day. The final straw came Thursday evening when Martha cornered Sarah in the grocery store produce section, loud enough for nearby shoppers to hear. "I've been researching," she announced, examining a cucumber with exaggerated attention. "Child Protective Services takes reports of minors in inappropriate situations very seriously. Just something to consider before your next pool party." The thinly veiled threat sent a chill through Sarah that had nothing to do with the refrigerated vegetable display. As other shoppers stared, she abandoned her half-filled cart and walked out, hands shaking as she called Tom. "She's threatening to call CPS on us," she said when he answered, tears evident in her voice. For letting our kids swim in our own backyard. Tom, what is happening to our life here? The morning after Martha's threat in the grocery store, Tom contacted a lawyer friend for advice. Keith Barnes specialized in property disputes and had helped the Andersons navigate the pool installation permits the previous year. Cameras recording minors in a private swimming area without consent. That's highly problematic from a legal standpoint, Keith explained over coffee at the Andersons' kitchen table. You have grounds for a harassment claim and potentially a restraining order. Tom rubbed his temples. We don't want a legal war, Keith. We just want peace. This neighborhood was our refuge before all this started. What if we tried mediation first? Sarah suggested. The community center offers a conflict resolution service with trained mediators. Keith nodded. That's reasonable. Document everything in the meantime, the cameras, the false police report, the threats. Just in case mediation doesn't work. Rather than escalating directly to legal action, the Andersons sent Martha a certified letter requesting professional mediation through the Oak Ridge Community Resolution Center. To their surprise, she agreed, though her terse response suggested she felt she was the wronged party. The mediation session was scheduled for the following Tuesday at the neutral territory of the community center. Jessica Chen from the HOA attended as an observer, while Michael Reeves, a retired judge who volunteered with the resolution program, facilitated the discussion. Let's begin by establishing that everyone wants the same thing. A peaceful community where all residents can enjoy their homes, Michael began after introductions. Ms. Wilkinson, would you share what's been troubling you about this situation? Martha sat rigidly in her chair, hands folded on her lap. I moved here for tranquility after 40 years in education. Children should be taught appropriate behavior and volume control. As the session progressed, Martha's carefully constructed facade began to crack. When Michael asked about her previous residence, her voice faltered for the first time. My husband Richard and I had planned to retire together. We've been married 37 years. She paused, removing her glasses to wipe them methodically. He died suddenly last year, heart attack while gardening. Our house was too full of memories, so I sold it. We never had children of our own. She glanced towards Sarah and Tom. We planned to have grandchildren visit our retirement home. Richard was going to build them a treehouse. The room fell silent as the revelation hung in the air. Sarah reached for Tom's hand under the table, a wave of understanding washing over her. Those children in your pool, Martha continued, her voice softer now, they sound like they're having the childhood Richard wanted for our grandchildren. It wasn't fair to. I shouldn't have. Michael gently redirected the conversation toward practical solutions. By session's end, they had reached several agreements. Martha would remove the cameras immediately. The Andersons would give her advance notice of large gatherings. A row of arborvitae trees would be planted along the fence line for additional privacy and sound buffering, with costs shared between both parties. As they were gathering their belongings, Martha hesitantly approached Sarah. I found a local book club that meets Thursday evenings, she said, not quite meeting Sarah's eyes. I've always enjoyed mysteries. Do you think, would that be a good way to meet people in the area? Sarah smiled gently. The library book club? I've heard wonderful things about it. My friend Diane actually attends. She could introduce you. 3 weeks later, the Andersons were enjoying a quiet evening swim when Zach pointed toward the fence line where the newly planted arborvitae stood. Look, Mom. Ms. Wilkinson's watering our trees. Sure enough, Martha was carefully tending to the greenery, a gardening hat shading her face. When she noticed them watching, she raised a hesitant hand in greeting. Sarah and Tom waved back. They never became close friends, and occasionally Martha still left polite notes about minor concerns instead of speaking directly, but gradually the tension eased. By summer's end, she had joined both the book club and the community garden committee. Tom reflected one evening as they watched the sunset from their pool deck. You know, sometimes people's complaints aren't really about what they seem to be about at first. Sarah nodded, thinking about the painful loss that had shaped Martha's behavior. Everyone's fighting battles we know nothing about, she murmured, grateful that in this battle at least, they had found a path to peace.